Hi, welcome to the Inside Source Executive Video Series. My name is Dawn Tura. I'm the President and CEO of SIG, which is Sourcing Industry Group. With me today is Michele Flynn, and Michele is a noted person in our industry. We go back close to 20 years of knowing each other. But Michele not only has been an innovator as far as bringing technology as a go-to platform to our members at SIG, but also she's a noted expert in facilities maintenance and facilities management as well. So Michele, we go back a long time, and certainly 20 years ago, the technology that you have come forward with on risk management didn't exist. So talk to me about just how you've seen the role of procurement, the role of a CPO, and all of that evolved to the point now that you have a sophisticated operation called Hiperos. Tell me how you saw the evolution.
Absolutely. So the reality for me today, having watched the procurement industry change over the last 20 and 30 years, is that a chief procurement officer, as you know, years ago was really focused on cost, effectiveness, making sure they bought the right product for their business units. 10 years ago, they really started to make sure the business units were involved in what was happening, making the right decisions for the right reasons. But in the last 10 years, what we really see is that CPO is now responsible and as many times is asked to be the one responsible in the organization for protecting the brand of the corporation. It's no more just about that supply chain. It's about making sure that not only are you doing business, you know who you're doing business with, you're doing business with the right people, that those people are the people that can protect your company, are compliant with regulations, they are compliant with your own corporate policies and procedures, that they are promoting the brand of the organization instead of distracting from the brand of the organization. So CPOs, Chief Procurement Officers, are focusing on risk, they're focusing on reputation, they're focusing on compliance. They're certainly still having to do everything they did before, but now they have to do so much more. And in addition to that, they're also having to do it for more than just, in many cases, the supply chain. So it used to be you worried about your vendor, you worried about your suppliers. But today, the reality is corporations are doing business with so many more third parties than they ever did before. And in many cases, I think there's actually a statistic out there that says that almost 60% of the revenue from any corporation is derived as a result of the business they do with other third parties. So if 60+% of your revenue is coming from relationships you have with third parties, then managing those third parties effectively becomes a really, really critical part of what needs to be done well in today's organizations.
So it's interesting though, and you bring up the marketing aspect, because we've just recently been in touch with the CMO Association, so Chief Marketing Officers, who typically don't play well with procurement. And suddenly they realize that a CPO could destroy the reputation of their company, whether it be through human trafficking or cybersecurity or geopolitical risks that they bring to the company. They could destroy their brand. So are you seeing more of the companies getting involved in recognizing that we could both protect the brand, but we also could destroy it if we didn't do our jobs well?
Oh, absolutely. And that's a big part of what's driving getting the procurement officing, the procurement teams more involved in assessing and managing risk and compliance throughout the supply chain as critically as they are, because companies do recognize, and we won't name names today, but there have been so many examples of organizations who, through no fault of anyone in particular in their own organization, have been caught up in terrible circumstances, penalties, fines, headlines in the Wall Street Journal for something a supplier, or worse, a subcontractor did while on their dime, and yet it's the prime corporation that hired that contractor that's held accountable for the behavior of their subcontractors. So I think there's been a huge increment in awareness in the organizations and in the world today over how critical it is to understand who you're doing business, what they're doing for you, what risks do they expose you to, and how do you manage that. And that's really what drives the need for automation and technology.
I can't agree more, because I was just with a company, they have a 110 questionnaire they have to go through for each new supplier they bring on. And it was written by IT. And they said, all we have to do is go down and check the boxes. And that to me is just such a wrong way to do it.
Correct.
Now, so cybersecurity, who should own that? Is it IT, or is it CPO, or is it both in conjunction?
So I'm going to answer that in sort of a broader perspective, right? So cybersecurity absolutely needs to be owned by IT, because they are the experts, they understand. We call them SMEs, subject matter experts. And whether it's information security or information privacy, or it's corporate social responsibility, or you could name any number of other things, right? Financial security, for example, anti-bribery, anti-corruption, legal. There are so many subject matter experts within the corporation. They need to own the policy. They need to own what are the rules, What do we require of people? What are the compliance issues we need to address? How do we address them? What are the controls? And what are our mitigation plans? But they can't execute independently because they don't have the access to the supply chain that the procurement officers do. So what works most effectively is when those subject matter experts and the procurement team work together to develop those policies and processes and enable the appropriate distribution. So instead of having every single supplier fill in a 110 question questionnaire, when that supplier may not expose the company to risk because they don't have access to private information, they don't have access to your networks, they're not getting, I mean, your landscaper, generally speaking, isn't going to get access to your data or your network and doesn't really need to answer an information security questionnaire. But there are others who you might not realize do, right? So what's most important is being able to understand who, what are they doing for you, what risks do they expose you to, and making sure that when those risks are identified, that you have a way to orchestrate assessing the level of controls that that supplier has in place and establishing an appropriate mitigation plan. And that's where the automation comes in.
So without automation, all I see it is another bottleneck that we're going to be facing. And that's what I keep hearing from procurement organizations is that I don't have the people and the bandwidth to go through 110 questions per vendor on things that might not apply, including my landscape designer. And
that's only one. That's just information security. So
Right.
you need to multiply that by a factor of 10, 20, 30, depending on the number of compliance issues that you're addressing. So that's exactly right. And what's really important is that you do understand what risks each organization could potentially expose you to. And on the basis of that, then you manage only those risks. So you take it, and we have clients who have 100,000 suppliers with whom they're doing business. And what's most imperative to them is that they don't waste the time, they don't waste the money, they don't allocate resources to dealing with the suppliers on issues that aren't relevant, but yet they allocate those resources to the most relevant issues so that they are compliant and they do have the controls in place. And the platform enables them to do that in a very automated manner.
Good. So we are out of time, but I always love your perspective. And to think that you created a company years before risk was ever at the forefront. And I mean, you had the vision long before any of us were talking about risk and the way you were. And so you are a visionary. You continue to evolve our evolution of the Office of the CPO. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So folks, we are out of time. And this is Dawn Tura. I hope you join us again on our executive interview series.